last decade or so, Stranger Things has turned into one of the biggest franchises in the world, with massive appeal and drawing power on Netflix. Every season for its time was setting viewership records. And even now the latest season's only behind Squid Game Season 1 in hours watched, with Squid Game being yet another worldwide phenomenon with insane popularity. I'm sure Season 5 is going to continue that trend, combined with the fact that it has the added power of being the finale to a decade's worth of story. However, that's not going to be the end of the franchise, it seems. We're going to be getting some continuations and spin-offs and works that bridge the gap between seasons, and so that's what I want to talk about today. We've got some more information about Stranger Things Tales from 85, which is an animated show that's set to debut in 2026. To me, this is a show that was a long time coming. It feels like Netflix and the duffers and whatnot have been talking about ideas for spin-offs or sequels for years and years at this point. I think it was way back in 2022 that they first started talking about it during the Season 4 release date announcement, but we didn't really know all that much about it. Hell, I'm pretty sure at the time there were rumors that it was going to be an anime named Stranger Things Tokyo and would have had the following premise. An encounter with the Upside Down evolves into a grand adventure for video game-loving brothers living on the outskirts of 1980s Tokyo. This was a concept that was never confirmed, and the fact that nobody seems to have mentioned it since seems to suggest it was never a thing and somebody took a fake leaker at their word. Always a risky business trying to determine whether leakers are legit or pushing their own fan fiction as fact. But regardless, I'm glad that this concept is seemingly a load of BS, because let's be real, if you're doing spin-offs and whatnot, the first one should be adjacent to the original story. Spin-offs are not always going to be a guaranteed success, and you want them to have some sort of linking factor or connection, and that's usually by showing off events that you'd heard about but not seen, or through exploring one of the characters' backstories or actions after the events of the main show. What you shouldn't be doing is simply going and saying, well, it's the same universe but it has none of the same characters, it isn't set in Hawkins or anywhere the characters have been, and instead follows these two random Japanese brothers who have no connection to anything or anyone at all. How would that possibly be compelling? It's essentially a total reset of everything. Hell, the show's never even been to Japan. I think somebody just wanted to fantasize about getting an anime adaptation to fulfill their weeby dreams. I mean, no shame to them, but it's a very good idea to go closer to home for the first foray into the extended universe, because it gives the franchise the best chance of success going forward. This, of course, brings us to Stranger Things 85, which was first properly confirmed in 2023, and was first envisioned as an almost Saturday morning cartoon. I'm guessing that referred more to actual visual design rather than the subject matter, because there is no way you could translate this franchise into a kid's cartoon and yet retain those elements that bring the world to life. It's an inherently violent and visceral franchise, filled up with more mature elements. So yeah, I'm convinced they just meant stylistically. Since that time though, the animation style apparently has pivoted in a completely different direction for much the same reasons I was talking about earlier. I think they figured that the style they were initially planning to go with wouldn't work for the tone the show was going to have, where violence is common and death is never off the table for anybody except the leads, who all have plot armor. Plus, since we know there's a brand new character coming into it, they need to be ready to showcase their very violent death, because that fits with the formula of the show, where the new important character is introduced and dies right before the final climax to up the stakes. We're talking about the likes of Bob, Alexei, and Eddie, all characters who lived in the dark shadow of death flags right from the moment they were introduced to the point that it became predictable. So now they're moving ahead with what's been described as a more CGI style. They showed clips or stills or something recently, but I can't find any of it online. Maybe I didn't look hard enough, but just nothing cropped up when I was searching. Either way, whenever I hear CGI style, I always get my hackles up. The reality is that it's a wide spectrum of visual styles and, honestly, of visual quality. If it's made on the cheap, it's essentially a guarantee that it's going to look truly terrible. And to make it look as good as possible, it'll cost a lot of money. Does Netflix really want to fork out the big bucks for that sort of project? Or would they prefer to skimp on the budget and release something that's there to just attract viewers for as little investment as possible by using the Stranger Things name? For that, I suppose we'll have to wait and see, but it does get me on edge. I did read an article from somebody that was at the Annecy Film Festival where they showcased some of the footage of the show, namely a couple of locations such as a lab, Hopper's house, an arcade, and then outside Hawkins' lab, and apparently there was also a shot of the gang riding their bikes. Now obviously I can't corroborate any of that because I can't find any recordings or whatnot of anything, so we'll have to take the articles at their word. That being said, one writer did say that the footage they saw felt like it came out looking like it was a show aiming for a younger audience. Now I don't know how true that would be, but it does have me skeptical. How young are we talking? Realistically, it can't be too young because that would be such a genre/subject matter audience mismatch. But if the writer thinks that, then I'd guess it would suggest the animation style is perhaps more childish than you'd expect, which is probably not a good thing to tell you the truth. And the more I hear about this, the more worried I'm becoming. Don't get me wrong, I'm still going to watch it regardless of if it sucks or not, but I'm not filled with high hopes just yet. Alongside this first look, we also got our first little blurb/synopsis talking about the show. It reads, "Welcome back to Hawkins in the stark winter of 1985. where the original characters must fight new monsters and unravel a paranormal mystery terrorizing their town in Stranger Things Tales of 85, an epic new animated series. Okay, we'll dive into maybe some theorizing and plot ideas in just a little bit, but I will say that this type of midquel, right from the get-go, frustrates me. I'm pretty sure that this is being executive produced by the Duffer brothers, even if they aren't the actual showrunners, and that thus you can probably consider this a canon show that's supposed to slot right into the gap between seasons 2 and 3. On the surface, that's all good, but it's also a little bit of a head-scratcher. This always happens when you start to fiddle around with timelines and add things in here and there. It becomes a question of, why is this extremely important event never mentioned by anybody throughout the course of the main story? After all, Season 3 was written without this cartoon in mind, and therefore anything that happens won't seem to have made any impact at all on the main cast, because it wasn't written into their characterization. That's why I think it would have been a better idea to perhaps include some of the characters in the main story, but only have them as guest roles or cameo parts. That way, you can pretty much do anything you want within reason, whilst also being able to have a few fun scenes or sequences that involve the party and the likes of Hopper. But when there's yet another paranormal adventure going on in Hawkins, despite the fact that the ending of Season 2 made it seem like it was all over with the Upside Down, throws things completely out of whack. Therefore, the show can't really be touching on Vecna or the Upside Down or anything of that nature, leaving a fresh paranormal mystery for the gang to solve, which in turn feels like something that would have been at the very least referenced in passing, you know? Oh, do you guys remember this completely unrelated paranormal event? Man, it's crazy how Hawkins has experienced the Upside Down and this other random thing. You know, it kind of stretches believability past a certain point and doesn't play nicely with the live action stuff they've already made. I'm honestly surprised they didn't just make a prequel series that explores some of the characters we already know and love, although that list is pretty small when you think about it. After all, part of the show's draw is the paranormal aspect. Yes, the nostalgia for America of yesteryear's there too, but at the same time, if you just have them exploring the past of Jim Hopper in depth, for instance, but without the darker, more fantastical elements, it's not really Stranger Things, it's just a typical drama which would not be living up to the legacy of the main show. Maybe if they hadn't had one kill off all the other experiment children, you could have made a spin-off focusing on one of them. Except Callie, because she was wildly unpopular, wasn't she? Or was that just the fact that they had a whole episode to follow that character in 11 and they were away from the main drama of the show? Do you reckon they'll ever bring her back, by the way? Is she going to be in the final season, or is she just completely done with? Either way, if there had been other surviving numbered children, there could have been a spin-off following some of them, especially if you could think of a range of different powers the characters could have. After all, Callie did have her own separate power from 11. That could have been a cool concept. Instead, it seems like they all had the same thing except for her, and now they're all dead, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, in the end though, so long as the story's really good, those are the sorts of things you could pretty easily brush to the side and forget about, but I think for now it remains a valid concern. Maybe I'm just massively overthinking things though. We'll have to wait and see. I do hate to be so much of a downer about the show, because in the end, despite it potentially not being what I would have wanted, I still will probably enjoy it in the end and sing its praises. I'm a fence sitter by nature, and flip-flopping is a hobby at this point. But now, I figure there's not much else to do but to talk through what we know for certain about the show. Well, first up, we know for a fact that it's going to be set in the winter of 1985, set a couple of months after the end of Season 2, and will have to be either January or February of that year, which is about 5 to 6 months before the events of Season 3. We know that it's going to be an adventure for the original characters. We have Jim Hopper and all the main members of the party, 11, Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Will, and Max. However, the character dynamics will be reset to pre-Season 3, so 11 and Mike will be in each other's pockets, and while she's friendly with the others, 11's likely not going to be close to any of them. Her and Max are not really friends at all, and are probably somewhere in between the frosty dislike of Season 2 and the newfound friendship of Season 3. Max and Lucas are likely in the early stages of their relationship, having kissed at the Snowball in December, whilst Dustin and Steve, if he's even in the show, which I assume he will be, are probably getting closer and establishing that brotherly bond that they have by Season 3, where they're super tight with their own secret handshake and everything. Nancy and Jonathan would be in the early stage of their relationship too, and I have the feeling the party is going to be slowly growing up and moving away from their Season 1 to 2 personas that we see in Season 3. It kind of feels like they're going to have it serve as a bit of a stopgap, a fill-in-the-blanks type of show in that respect. Maybe have Hopper slowly start crushing more and more on Joyce, but not wanting to make any moves yet because Bob only just died a couple of months beforehand. And then obviously you're going to have that paranormal stuff, but I'm curious as to how all of that goes down. Will they all be involved? Will only some of them be involved? Is it going to be more of a Hopper story with cameos from the kids, or more a kid's story with cameos from the adults? Or is it going to be a whole combination? Plus you have this new character, Nikki, who's described as a tinker. No idea what role she's going to play, but you can see the death flags for this girl a mile off. That's the Stranger Things way, and it's probably the cleanest way to get rid of her, so that it makes sense she never appears in any live-action content. Beyond that though, I think if we want to go any deeper, we really do need to wait and see. I think we probably won't get much more information about this until later this year. I'm curious, are they going to release this in the beginning of next year? They usually like to release things around the time they happen in the show, so maybe a January to February release? Probably February, because surely they'd want a little gap between season 5 and this, right? Like I said, we'll have to wait and see what they tell us. Maybe at Comic-Con? I don't know. But yeah, with all that being said, these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think about Stranger Things 85? Are you excited for it? Maybe not? Do you share some of my queries about it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.